Hello everyone. Today we're going to start with lesson 3 from unit 2, which is thermal energy and heat. Actually, in this lesson we are going to define thermal energy. We want to differentiate between thermal energy and temperature. Also, we want to define heat and calorie, to differentiate between heat and temperature, differentiate between heat and thermal energy. We want to focus on this point, but before we start, we want to talk about what is thermal energy. We talked about thermal energy before. We said it's a form of energy. Actually, thermal energy, if you're talking about it, if you want to define thermal energy, is the total kinetic energy of all particles in a substance. If you remember, we said all particles, they are moving, they have a constant motion, and so the total kinetic energy of all particles, so this one in a substance, this one we call it what? A thermal energy. Okay, thermal energy, because it's an energy, we said energy is measured by a unit, which is what? The joule. Now we talk in the previous lesson the meaning of temperature. The meaning of temperature, it's not the total kinetic energy. The temperature is related to the average kinetic energy of a particle. You have to differentiate now between thermal energy and temperature. Thermal energy, it's talking about, let's go back to the definition, is the total kinetic energy of all particles in a substance, but for temperature is the average kinetic energy of particles. Okay, here thermal energy, as we mentioned, is the total kinetic energy of all particles. For example, I'll give you this example, also is mentioned in your book. A glass of water can have the same temperature as a lake, but the lake has much more thermal energy because the lake contains many more water molecules. For example, again, to understand this one, imagine you have this glass of water, let's say, okay, it's a glass of water, for example, and this example, for example, let's this say, and this is a lake. Okay, both of them, if you measure the temperature of them, the average kinetic energy, and you use the thermometer to measure the temperature for the glass and the lake, you can find they have the same temperature. Maybe the temperature for this is 20 Celsius degrees, okay, but and the lake temperature, which is 20 Celsius degrees. Okay, what about the thermal energy? Which one it has more particles? For sure, the lake, it has more water particles than what? Than the glass. So the thermal energy is more in the lake. So the thermal energy depends on the number of what? The particles. As the number of particles increase, the thermal energy increase. But the temperature, you might have this, the different substances, they have what? The same temperature, as I mentioned here in this example. Okay, let's continue now. So since we understand the meaning of the thermal energy, which is the total kinetic energy, and it's more and we talked about in more particles in the lake that give more thermal energy, let's answer question 5 here, which is on page 124. What are two factors that determine the thermal energy of a substance? The first one you have to mention about the two factors if we want to answer this question. The first factor, for sure, the total amount of particles, number of particles, total amount of particles. Okay, the second factor, for sure, the temperature it will affect. As the temperature increase, the particles can move what? The particles can move more, right? So these are the two factors that affect what? The thermal energy. One, the total amount of particles. Two, the temperature. Write it down and copy this answer and write it down in your notebook. Okay? Let's answer question 6 here. Since we're talking about the amount, it affects the number of the thermal energy. Let's talk about for each object pair in the table below. Circle the object that has more thermal energy. Assume that both objects are at the same temperature. Okay, they have the same temperature, but I want to know which one it has more energy. So here I have to look to the other factor, which is the number of particles. Let's look at the first one, the bowl of soap and soup here and pot of soup. Which one is more? For sure, this one. It's bigger because it has more particles. Small balloon, large balloon, for sure large balloon. Tiger or a house cat, for sure tiger. Okay, so these are the answers for question 5 and the question 6. Copy them and write you have to differentiate in the meaning of the temperature, heat and thermal energy. Let's continue now. We always hear heat, right? Okay, so if we want to talk about the heat, what is the heat now? Let's talk and define what is the heat. Heat is the energy transferred from an object at a higher temperature to an object at lower temperature. If you remember, we did an experiment, a virtual lab. We added water from cold water to hot water. So the temperature start to be transferred from higher temperature object to the lower temperature object. Okay, energy in the form of heat always flows from hot to cold. This is very important. I'm going to repeat this again. If you have two objects, object number 1 and you have object number 2, I'm going to change the color of it to differentiate between them. This is object number 2. If I said that the temperature of object number 1, which is 30 Celsius, this is the temperature of it, and this one is 15 Celsius. The energy, the particles in this object, because it's higher temperature, they move more and more and more. They have higher kinetic energy, so the energy will be transferred from higher temperature to lower temperature in a form of heat. Okay, till they reach what? Equilibrium, from higher temperature to lower temperature. So what is heat? Is the energy transferred from an object at a higher temperature to an object at lower temperature. Okay, to make sure that you understand, I'm going to show you this video. Listen carefully and write notes while you are watching.
What exactly is heat? Click the pictures to learn more about thermal energy and heat. Particles in all matter are constantly moving. As illustrated here, the particles of water in the glass are in motion. Anything that is in motion has kinetic energy. Thermal energy is the total kinetic energy of the particles in a substance.
Okay, let's move to talk about temperature.
We think of temperature as relating to hot or cold. In science, temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a substance.
And this is about heat.
Heat is the energy transferred from an object at a higher temperature to an object at a lower temperature. When ice is put in water, energy is transferred in the form of heat from the warmer water to the colder ice cube. This transfer of energy can cause a change of state, the melting of the ice cube. Heat can be measured with units of energy. A calorie, C, is a unit of energy. A joule, J, is another unit of energy. 1 calorie is equal to 4.18 joules.
Okay, so this is about the thermal energy, temperature, and heat in general. Next time we will talk more about heat, and we will discuss the unit that is mentioned in this video, the joule and calorie. Okay, till now you have to know the differences between these three terms, these main three terms. If you have any question about them, you can send me your question. Thank you for listening.